Welcome to another video of the comic series. It's me again. Today I'm talking about how the Empire disposed of the Separatists. I've already uploaded the recap of the Star Wars series, and many more. Now if you haven't seen the story and you don't remember, please go watch it. Check out the link below. You're watching Star Wars Theory 2.0. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe to get all latest videos. Let's get started. How the Empire disposed of the Separatists. The Galactic Empire replaced the Galactic Republic and the Separatist Coalition, which was responsible for bringing back together with a galaxy that had spent the last 3 years breaking apart by the Clone Wars. And although many suffered for this, it was the ex-Separatists who would feel the brunt of this oppressive regime. We've spoken a lot before about the Empire's encounters with Separatists. For example, in Legends, where the Empire dealt with Separatist refugees by merely throwing them off carrier transport to destroy them, so they didn't have to think about rehoming them. In the canon series, however, things are far less straightforward. So I put together what I'd say is a reasonably good picture of how I thought the Empire was coping with the Separatists. Now, the newly established Empire officially ends the fight, inevitably hit hard. Without the assistance of the Droid army, any Separatist combatants were quickly wiped out. Compared to battle-hardened clones, they were relatively weak, and we would assume that in the weeks following Order 66, the clones murdered countless innocent civilians in the process of killing Separatist soldiers. It must have been a bloodbath. Today, one of the most primary examples of how Separatists were handled under the Empire is in the actions of Willem Tarkin in the world of Antar 4, in an incident that would be called Antar Atrocity, a very fitting term. About a year after the Emperor's ascension, Tarkin was sent to Antar 4 to demonstrate the world that had been a robust Separatist supporter during the Clone Wars. It was to ensure that most of the galaxies, especially ex-Separatist worlds, were made very clear what would happen if the line weren't towed. And Tarkin did just that in brutal, classic fashion. He went to Antar 4 and launched anyone's terror campaign. I think anyone the Empire may have even accused of having any disloyalty to the Empire was arrested, held in bogus court, and executed. It's important to remember that Tarkin did not spend any time attempting to distinguish the Imperial loyalist from the ex-Separatist, nor the native population of Antar 4 telling people who just visited. And frankly, even though you were only visiting the country and still a robust Imperial supporter, you could have been fired at by the bunch of clones only because you were there. That now sent the galaxy a very, very direct message. But it caused an uproar within the Senate, and Tarkin had to quit the spotlight for a while and went and managed to the creation of the Death Star. Now, given this atrocity, you would assume that the Empire managed to unite the galaxy from there. This does not seem to be the case, though, and the rebels hadn't done much stronger. They remain the scapegoat of the Empire for almost all. I believe that the Empire would have been swift to destroy every world economically in the Clone Wars effectively. The Separatist Alliance had built countless factories in their loyal world's mines and other essential things. And practically, from the viewpoint of the Empire, this could never be Palpatine if the ex-Separatists were weak, and it was simply not a choice to let them manage vital resources. I assume that most factories will have been demolished and valuable parts are given to Imperial loyalists. Businesses that usually sponsor the Empire, such as the Kuwait drive yards, will have been destroyed, and everything that could not be repossessed by Imperial thugs. And as far as natural resources, such as mines and fields, are concerned, it is quite possible that the Imperialists actually confiscated them and took charge of them directly, bringing in their people from outside the planet, mainly from humans. That will eventually have contributed to the displacement of countless civilians and the development of a refugee crisis. And understanding this is very important. Yet the refugees did not survive long under the monarchy. In other words, they were pirates, slaves, criminal gangs, and the Empire itself. We were easy to pick, and under the sovereignty, we were brutalized entirely. It's also important to note that the Imperials didn't like aliens in Surprise. Surprise, aliens were a productive force in the Separatist coalition. I mean, look at the Separatist Council. They're all aliens, which is why the Empire nurtured a very inhospitable alliance between aliens and rebels. Of essence, this provided a bond with many people. If you were an alien, you were possibly a separatist. So either these people would hate you because you were a separatist and other people blame the separatists for one or two of the galaxy's issues. They wouldn't hate you necessarily, yet they would be very apathetic and wouldn't want to interact with you because it attracted unwanted publicity from the Empire, and under a terrorist date like the Empire where no one was above suspicion. It's quite easy to see how imperialists might see someone hanging too much around with aliens and immediately jump to a separatist sympathizer, mainly if they had a quota to reach. These acts of brutality to the separatists did not die in the first few years after the Clone Wars. They went on, and even on, loyal imperialists who lived much of their adult lives under the Empire. Yet, just as it happens to come from a nation that had been in the Clone Wars with the Separatist coalition, they were essentially shut out of Imperial society. For example, Imperial academies seldom recruited recruits from the Separatist worlds to keep their chances of sabotage small. Even having the unfortunate affiliation with something nationalist would have been enough to effectively destroy your life for the next 2 decades of Imperial rule. And well, also, if you were accepted into saying that the Imperial Navy or Army would use your affiliation with something nationalist against you to impede your advancement through the ranks, you would probably end up being sent to the far outer rim world for some mouth to use as cannon fodder. Now, you would think, well, it's pretty apparent that the Empire was running a terrorist state and treating these ex-separatists, for even people who were somehow aligned with separatists, quite poorly, and people spoke out against it. Yet, this isn't the case. Most of the Senates were his faithful supporters who had fought the rebels during the Clone Wars, the only citizens who could ever really have had a chance to hold Palpatine accountable. So those old grudges never went away immediately. That is why the Clone Wars were such a massive occurrence that it continued to form the galaxy all the way through and beyond the Galactic Empire. The Separatists will always be the people's enemy to many. I would suggest that most of the slaves and refugees we see during the era of the Galactic Empire were probably affiliated in some way with something fundamentally separatist, whether homeworld species or just being identified with such things. But the nature of this was Palpatine, enabling his people to look down on the supposed evil separatist threat. It essentially encouraged him to do what he wanted and to go unchecked. Still, what are you guys thinking? How was this government handling ex-separatists? And why did Palpatine persist? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. That was the review for the comic series, How the Empire Disposed of the Separatists. I hope you enjoyed this comic. I'm going to upload all other comic series as well. Remember to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. See you in the next one.